Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Peter Leach, and I'm the chair of the Motion Picture Production Industry Association of BC. On behalf of the MPPIA Board of Directors and our members, I would like to welcome you to this information session to update you on the work that the industry representatives and our partners have been doing to prepare for the safe return to work. COVID-19 pandemic has been a devastating impact for those individuals and families whose health has been impacted. We would like to recognize the tremendous contribution that the healthcare workers, first responders, and all those that have contributed to keeping essential services running have made to our daily lives, and we are truly grateful for their dedication and service. We are also proud of the work that the BC provincial government has done in implementing informed and well thought out health and safety policies and protocols that have been supported by the majority of British Columbians. This will undoubtedly allow us to return to the new normal much faster if we continue to stay the course. We've had a great relationship with our partners at the BC provincial government who have been very supportive and played a major role in the success of the industry. On behalf of Minister Lisa Baer, I would like to introduce Asha Bhat, Assistant Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture, for welcoming remarks. Asha.
You today. I'm sorry that Minister Baer has been pulled away and is unable to join you today, but I do want to thank MPPIA for pulling this session together. I think it's important more than ever that even though we are physically distant, that we are staying in close communication with each other. And over the past few weeks, the Minister and I have reached out to leaders in BC's film and television sector. We've spoken to MPPIA, IATSE, CMPA, MPA, UBC, CPACTRA, Creative BC, of course, and many others. And these calls have really helped us to better understand the impact of COVID-19 on the film and television sector, and of course, its talented workforce and the implications across the board for BC's economy. There have also been some critical channels for information sharing and understanding, and this has led us to better understand where there may have been some gaps between the relief plans so that our minister could bring forward those issues to the federal government. I'll just talk for a few minutes, if you'd like, about our government's response to the pandemic. Our approach from the beginning has been to coordinate our efforts with the federal government. BC's COVID-19 action plan provides $5 billion in income supports, tax relief, and direct funding for people, businesses, and services. There are a number of benefits under the provincial plan for workers, including the BC Emergency Wage Benefit. Now, this is a tax-free payment of $1,000 to help people cover bills and stay afloat during the crisis. I just want to note that applications opened today for this program, if you'd like to check it out. And we're protecting renters and halting evictions, freezing rents, and providing a temporary supplement to help cover rent payments. These measures were brought in to complement federal programs, including the Canada Emergency Response Benefit that provides $500 per week for up to 16 weeks. One of the things your industry leaders flagged early on was that some workers are still receiving royalty benefits and small contracts, which have left them ineligible for this benefit. Minister Baer raised this on her calls with the federal government, and we were really pleased to see that they heard our calls and expanded the eligibility for this benefit to allow people to earn up to $1,000 per month in income. I know that provides some relief for people in the creative sector who are still getting small contracts or gigs during the pandemic. And we're doing everything we can to also support our small businesses. Businesses can access the federal wage subsidy, which has enabled owners to keep their staff employed and be in a better position to get up and running when it's safe. We know managing fixed costs is one of the biggest challenges businesses are facing right now, and we have extended tax filing and payment deadlines for several provincial taxes, including the employer health tax, the provincial sales tax, to help businesses get through this immediate crisis. Last week, we announced the Canada Emergency Rent Assistance Program, and that was done in partnership with the federal government. Now, the program will help thousands of small businesses in British Columbia with their rent, providing over $300 million in relief. In BC, we also cut commercial property tax bills by an average of 25%, providing relief of up to $700 million, and are giving businesses more time to pay their property taxes. For many, immediate liquidity is a top concern, but there are programs that can help. If cash flow is of concern for you, I encourage you to look into the federal government's Canada Emergency Business Account and the loan guarantee for small and medium-sized enterprises under the Business Credit Availability Program. I'll conclude by saying that, we know this has been an extraordinarily challenging period for everyone in BC, but particularly for those of you on this call that have been unable to work for some time now. And I know more than anything, you want to get back to work. But I'm sure you agree that our first priority has to be the health and safety of everyone in our province, including the workers in this sector. Together, we have managed to flatten the curve, and that's due to the collective efforts of British Columbians to follow the orders and recommendations of the provincial health officer. Physical distancing, good hand hygiene, and staying home as much as possible, especially if you're sick. We're looking now at how we can begin to dial up our economy once the provincial health officer tells us it's safe to do so. And we are also speaking with our federal counterparts on how we can work within the parameters that they have established to help us fight this pandemic. I'll leave it there, as I know you have so much more to discuss, but I truly want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate. Take care and stay safe.
Hi, Peter.
I apologize, I was on mute.
Yes, so do you want to
I'll
take
start
that?
again.
Okay.
Like many industries globally, BC's motion picture industry has been severely impacted and almost came to a halt over the last 45 days. Thousands of industry workers have been out of work, and the majority of us want to get back as soon as it's safe to do so. We don't know when that's going to be, but when it does happen, we want to be ready to go. One thing I know for sure is that this industry is up for the challenge. In BC, one of our competitive strengths is that industry stakeholders collaborate with each other and problem solve, and our problem-solving abilities are second to none. Along with a number of other industry leaders, today's panel is focused on our safe return to work, and I look forward to hearing from them this afternoon. I would like to now introduce our panelists. Wendy Noss, President of the Motion Picture Association of Canada, representing major US studios. Prem Gill, CEO of Creative BC. Tracy Wood, VP Canadian Affiliates, Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. Tracy Friesen, VP of Canadian Media Producers Association, BC Producers Branch. Kendrie Upton, Executive Director, DGC BC Branch. Phil Klapwyk, Business Representative, IATSE 891. And Justis Greene, Producer and past original film commissioner under Grace McCarthy. I would now like to introduce our first speaker, Wendy Noss from the MPA. Wendy.
See. Yes. Okay. So thanks, Peter, and thanks, Prem. I'm really so pleased to be participating today and offer you a brief view of what I've seen in BC over the last 6 weeks, what I hope to see in the months ahead. So for those who don't know, I represent the major studios in terms of their government relations across Canada, member studios of the MPA, which includes Disney, Paramount, Sony, Netflix, NBC Universal, and Warner Brothers. Everyone here knows the pandemic shut down all live action production in Canada, including more than 25 pilots, features, series, and MOWs our studios had in prep or in production in BC. I certainly appreciate the impact this has had, most significantly and consequentially for all of the talented British Columbians across the province. In fact, at the beginning of March, which feels like a very long time ago, I had been working on a project in collaboration with IA at 891, with Phil and with Kendrie and her team at DGC to amplify the incredible talent of their members showcased on our member studio productions made in BC and enjoyed by audiences around the world. I certainly hope we can get back to work on that project soon. But again, for now, what I wanted to do is share with you the 5 key factors I've seen over the last number of weeks and the reasons why these are the same factors that lead me to be optimistic about BC in terms of a jurisdiction of choice for our studio investments in the future. First is the industry collaboration that Peter talked about. At the MPPIA table, it is really unique. You have studio owners, VFX animation, all the guilds and unions, producers, CMPA, AMPTP, who represents our studios for labor purposes, everyone coming together and working in collaboration. I know I've been in constant contact with Marnie and Prem and the Creative BC team over the last weeks, feels like months, but really important as our studios really want to understand the landscape and how we can start planning for moving forward. Two is the focus of the BC government. The title of this session framed as how the motion picture industry will play a role in economic recovery. I mean, there's no question, but the Premier understands and recognizes the significance of this industry to BC's economy. He's spoken about it numerous times over the last few weeks, and certainly Prem Gill's role on the Premier's Economic Recovery Task Force really speaks to that. Minister Bear has echoed that sentiment on a number of occasions, including on a roundtable call last week. And that is really important, I think, in terms of where the focus of the government is on how we move forward. Third is the coordination with all levels of government and the region. So whether it's VEC, City of Vancouver Film Office, all of the regional film offices that are so important to ensuring we can return. The Mayor of Vancouver has also reached out, expressed his view as to how significant our industry will be, and we welcome the opportunity to work with him as well. Fourth, the federal government. The Minister of Culture, Stephen Guilbeault, had just been to BC the week before production was shut down. I'd been visiting with him to see some of the talented people at ILM in Vancouver. And he's really been such a strong and effective leader in advancing the interests of our sector. We were pleased to support all of the labor organizations, IATSE and others, who worked so hard to ensure film and television workers who might not all otherwise qualify for EI were covered by the emergency relief benefits. And as challenging as this time has been, we're really hopeful we can continue to work with all levels of government to support our continued investment in BC. Finally, the fifth factor is the secret sauce, which is the people of BC. Not just as partners in production, but the response to this health crisis has really shown how when there are informed and effective policies, there is a way to deal with this so that we can have BC return to production sooner, sooner than many other parts of the world. So again, thank you, Prem and Peter, for the opportunity to participate and for your ongoing collaboration. And I look forward to working with everyone to address the challenges ahead. Now we will turn it over to Prem Gill.
Thank you, Wendy, for all your kind words and your ongoing support. Yes, we really have been speaking a lot the last few weeks. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you via Zoom today from my home, located on the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I feel very fortunate to be safe and to have a home, and to also be working with a team of amazing people at Creative BC. So I want to thank all of them for their commitment over the last few weeks, where there's been so much uncertainty across the many creative sectors that we support. And it really has been amazing how the team has rallied together. I also want to thank the industry leaders, many of whom are on this call today. You have all been so collaborative and supportive. And again, it really speaks to the special sauce that we have here in British Columbia. And thank you to Asha for joining us today and sharing your insights from the government, and Minister Bear and the entire ministry, and Premier Horgan for your ongoing commitment to this sector. But mostly, I want to thank all of you, the talent out there. Really, the reason British Columbia is such a successful jurisdiction, and I do believe will continue to be strong, is because of the talent. We talk a lot about all the great things here in BC, the infrastructure, our location, our time zone, but it really is you people who together have built such a strong sector over 40 years. Also want to make a special note to the visual effects, animation, post-production industry who's been going and working in the past month. And we want to ensure that they continue to in the coming months. But the quick and nimble action that many of the employers took to mobilize the workforce to be able to work from home, to continue to deliver the content that they were committed to, has been remarkable. So thank you very much. As Wendy mentioned, there's a few things happening at Creative BC. I'm going to share a little bit of that with you, and then we'll have some questions I know later as well. And some of my colleagues today will be sharing further insights. As Wendy noted, I do have the privilege of sitting on the Premier's Economic Development Council. Really a large part of the work of this council has been helping the province understand the economic impacts across sectors like the motion picture industry, as well as what the long-term economic recovery will look like, and really working closely to understand guidelines and protocols that will come out that we can support across the creative sectors. My team and I have been working across different levels of government as well, and ensuring that they understand all the impacts happening both economically, and we also know the social and personal impacts going on for so many of you. Creative BC will also in the next couple of weeks be opening up our project development funds and grant program called Industry Initiatives, which some of you may be familiar with out there. What we're hoping is that once these programs open, we are trying to make them as flexible as possible with different criteria than what you're used to seeing. So there'll be more details coming on that. So I encourage you to follow Creative BC, subscribe to our newsletter, and just keep in touch with us on that front. And in terms of production, as you know, the province has announced that we can expect to hear from the Premier on Monday or Tuesday on what the plan for British Columbia will look like. And that will really help us in formulating what the sector plan can be in terms of safety, protocols, and getting back to work. The ActSafe Motion Picture Safety Committee has formed a coalition which will be facilitated by Marnie Orr, our BC Film Commissioner here at Creative BC, and comprised of both MPPIA, all the MPIA members, the unions, the Gill, CMPA, AMPTP, the vendors and suppliers, that will be looking to build the plan and working with many of you out there on what department by department plans will look like with the studios, with the producers, with the employers, the unions and the guilds. So there will be more information further on in this call around what that group is doing, but it really is there to ensure that our return to work, we understand what the easements and restrictions look like and how they can be adapted within this sector. And I'll just quickly summarize for you the 3 different areas, again, that Creative BC has been focused on in terms of supporting the motion picture sector. That local compliance, ensuring that this sector has been contributing to the safety of and health of British Columbians, and you have been. I know that productions were very quickly and safely wound down for the time being, and that has really had an impact. As Asha said earlier, we have seen the curve flattening in British Columbia, and some of the reopenings we will see will be with the intent to keep us safe. We know that work's going to look different for all of us, and many things in our lives are, but the collaboration again and your commitment has been one of the key drivers in why we've been so successful in this. Secondly is the provincial leadership and the opportunity for us to participate in the Premier's task force and the industry planning. So that is the coalition that I just spoke of and what that plan and return to work will look like. These are really important elements that are going to keep us all healthy and moving along through all of this. I'll also make note of some national collaborations that Creative BC is participating in. We are part of the National Production Task Force that has been led through the CMPA federally, as well as Creative BC is a member of the Association of Provincial and Territorial Funding Agencies. And through this group we have a subcommittee of all the film commissions across the country. Again, collaborating on how we can share best practices, ensuring that there's a lot of alignment across Canada. And within that, Creative BC also, I'd like to thank all our 8 regional film commissions out there that work so closely with us for their patience and understanding, and also ensuring that in their jurisdictions that people are remaining healthy and supportive of the protocols that the province has asked us all to participate in. So please stay informed, keep in touch with us, keep an eye out for resources that are coming out of Creative BC. I think as soon as we can, again, we'll speak more to that, what specific guidelines and roadmaps look like for British Columbia. They're coming soon. We have amazing people who are leading this initiative. And again, it is going to come back to all of us doing our part and participating in it. So I know it's been a hard time. I hope that you are remaining well and healthy and optimistic. Thank you. Oh, I'm introducing Tracy Wood, excuse me. Tracy Wood, over to you.
Let me see. Am I unmuted? I'm good? Okay. Thanks, Prem, and thank you so much for your leadership. It's been inspiring to see how you brought everyone together during the crisis and leading everyone to feel included and making a contribution during this time. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the VP of the Canadian affiliates of the AMPTP, which is the labor relations arm of the major US studios. So I'm mostly focused on the labor relations aspects, and also I'm a board member at ActSafe. So I'm very tied up in the mechanics of the health and safety initiatives that we're going to bring to bear over the next little bit. But to begin with, you probably all know that in BC that we're fortunate in the greater context. We had a comprehensive testing regime and a health strategy with some really amazing leadership from our favorite public health officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, and all of that has really paid off for us here in BC. We've had COVID-19 clusters reported, but for the general population, the public health officer believes that we're in a pretty good position to start a phased reopening of business, and that's good for us. You may not know because it's the mechanics, but we never had a shelter-in-place order here in BC. Most businesses were not required to close and therefore don't need a specific order to reopen. But we do have public health guidance that we need to take into consideration. And of course, we need the confidence of the film industry workers, all of you out there, and the public to be able to get back up and running. And that's going to be key to us getting back in business. But we are really well positioned to do that. We have guidance documents from the Public Health Office for other industries, and we can look at those to see what might apply to our industry. And WorkSafe BC has also given guidance to other industries and has indicated that next week they're going to be doing specific guidance for the film industry. So that'll be really helpful when we're looking at our best practices documents as well. The Public Health Office is encouraging industries to submit their plans for getting back to business, and we're hoping to be able to do that when we get that guidance and we can do those best practices. And we're right in the middle of that work right now. When we're planning for reopening, we need to keep in mind work site access and control. We need to think about cleaning and inspections. We need to think about social distancing plans. And we also need to have a really comprehensive plan for communication with all workers. So that's complicated, but that sort of forms how we're going to approach this. So in an effort to tackle all those issues, you've already heard, but we've, along with ActSafe, we've formed the BC Motion Picture Industry COVID-19 Best Practices Coalition, or as we like to call it, the BC MPI C19 BPC. No, I'm kidding, but we're gonna have to come up with something better than that, aren't we? Anyway, it is a really comprehensive group of people that will collaborate on what we're doing going forward. And Creative BC will be steering this coalition. It includes the studio safety reps, all the unions, and myriad of stakeholders across the industry. We will be taking into consideration that guidance from WorkSafe BC when it comes, and then breaking it down by department and working to develop those best practices. We won't be doing this in isolation. The US is currently doing this work. It has its meetings ongoing right now. And today I attended my first meeting of the Section 21 Health and Safety Committee in Ontario that's also doing that work. And then the intention is for everyone to come together and compare notes so that we don't have conflicting best practices across the jurisdictions. Then hopefully we can present that plan to the public health officer regarding how we plan to keep the public and all our workers safe when we get back up and running. It'll probably be a phased reopening while we get used to this new reality, and we obviously deal with logistics that are beyond our control, like the border and orders regarding quarantine that are currently in place that we can't deal with right now on a local level. And of course, we have the benefit of other jurisdictions around the world that have already done this work. So we'll be poaching liberally from their practices when we develop our own. And then I just personally want you to all know that we're working very hard to have your confidence, that we have your best interests and your safety is our top priority. You know, I was talking to someone today as a personal anecdote that that because we're so used to staying home that actually like gearing up to go out the door is a major undertaking. I said it felt a little bit like The Walking Dead going out on a supply run. And we're going to have to shift our thinking if it's like, okay, it's time to go back to work, and we have to make you feel comfortable and confident when we're ready to do that. And we're just working hard to do that. So there you go. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Tracy Friesen, who has a long history in the film industry, as you probably all know, but most recently was hired as the managing VP at the BC branch of the Canadian Media Producers Association. And over to Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy. And thank you, Peter and Prem, for the invitation here today. It's quite a time to start a new job. Let me just say that. I'm 3 months in, and I'm glad to have had at least a month under my belt before this hit. And I've joined this collection of people to really put my head down and figure out what best can be done to serve our members and serve the industry at this time. So as Tracy noted, I'm the Managing Vice President of the BC branch of the Canadian Media Producers Association. The BC branch is part of a national industry organization that represents independent producers and production companies. We have offices in Ottawa and Toronto, and of course in Vancouver, where we serve over 100 members. I work closely with Liz Shorten, who many of you may know, and who is now the CMPA's Chief Operating Officer on a national level, but still living here in Vancouver. The CMPA BC branch has been intersecting with a number of things that you've heard about already, many provincial activities. For instance, on the MPA board, feels like every other day we're meeting. I think it might be once a week, but it's been we've been representing independent producers' interests at that table, and also meeting directly with the BC government. Members of our team here in Vancouver have been very active on urgent issues around industrial relations, insurance, especially health and safety, including through ActSafe. I know Jason Lee and Marcia Newberry have been involved in those kinds of meetings and are working with others in this coalition, that the ABCDEF BCIB coalition that Tracy has named. And Creative BC, of course, has been an essential hub for us and for everybody during these times. The CMPA BC branch has fed into processes and planning around economic impact, development, and what's coming down the pipe for that, and getting producers back to work. I'll touch on 3 or 4 highlights on a national level as well, noting that the CMPA has been facilitating a weekly call. It's called the National Production Industry Task Force, has been mentioned by a couple of other people who are on this meeting and attend it weekly. There's over 70 stakeholders, unions and guilds and film commissions, federal and provincial funding agencies, industry associations that are coming together to share information about the actions around COVID-19. Also bi-weekly provincial industry association meeting, which MPI is also a part of, where we are talking across the country around different approaches. The CMPA has spearheaded 2 economic impact reports with the consulting firm Nordicity. Both are looking at the period from mid-March, from shutdown, to July 1st. The first was released last week, and it used the methodology that the CMPA has used to publish our annual profile, statistics-heavy profile report. And that showed potential losses in that period of time of up to $2.5 billion in the motion picture sector, and roughly 80,000 cast and crew across the country potentially affected by this. This information was shared up with government. It helps to create the conditions to have a really realistic conversation around what is happening in the sector, and was also picked up by the media with the notion of this is a real wake-up call to what's at stake. There's a second report on its way. A survey was done nationally. It's being still tabulated. 600 production companies across Canada responded. So this one focuses more on the corporate and company impact of the shutdown. Nearly 100 companies in BC responded, and we're hoping to have results that we can share really soon. In that process, we've really come to appreciate that the financial burden to companies comes in phases. The wind down phase, of course, the carrying and bridging sort of business continuity phase that many people are finding themselves in now, and then ramp up, which we're all looking forward to, and also future recovery and an acknowledgement of future additional costs that will become a part of doing business in a post-COVID world. So we're really attentive to that, whether for domestic producers or service producers and whatever genre and size of company. So part of our ongoing work with the federal government has been giving real-time feedback to some of the various relief programs, and we've had the provincial government support in that kind of work as well, related to the CERB, wage subsidy, the loan, various programs that have come to play, and we've been able to give pretty specific feedback and seen adjustments being made. So we have recognized that not everything has worked perfectly for production companies, and that there have been some peculiar challenges that we've been working to address with government. And then the last point on a federal level is people may be aware that the Canadian Heritage Minister announced a $500 million emergency response fund for the cultural sector now a couple of weeks ago. We've been a part of pressuring for more information and also offering up ideas around how some of those funds may be allocated. We're hoping early next week that there'll be some more concrete answers around that. We want to ensure that the motion picture industry gets its fair share, but we do recognize that other industries are also a part of this relief package, sport and arts. And then of course, we also want to ensure that British Columbia gets its fair share as well. Maybe somehow through Creative BC, or we'll see how that plays out, but we're very active in those conversations. One thing that we do know is that it will flow through existing agencies like the Canada Media Fund and Telefilm, and that it is earmarked primarily for business continuity, not necessarily for future stimulus. And that it won't necessarily be mutually exclusive from other federal support. So we're learning every bit that we can and trying to share out the information, and again, hoping that there'll be more to announce on that next week. So these national considerations all serve to strengthen the sector here in British Columbia. And we know that this province is really well positioned to get back to work once the new guidelines and protocols are put in place for safe production practices. We're really confident at the CMPA that this industry can be a key driver in British Columbia's economic recovery, and we'll continue to work on that on everyone's behalf and with this group of collaborative partners and stakeholders. So thank you. I am now going to introduce Michelle Grady, who is the chair of the Animation and Visual Effects Alliance. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tracy, and everybody for including me on the panel. I'm really happy to be able to talk to everyone on the call about the impact of the crisis on the digital side of the business, the animation and visual effects side of the business, which, as you can imagine, has been impacted quite differently than physical production, very tied, but has a very different type of impact. As Prem mentioned, I'm actually going to introduce myself a little bit more to give some context for those who don't know me. I'm the Executive Vice President of Sony Pictures Imageworks. We're an animation and visual effects company, and I'm also the chair of the Animation and Visual Effects Alliance of BC. And so I'm speaking for the industry generally. As Prem mentioned, we can start with a little bit of a good news angle for our sector, in that we are digital. And so we were able to move very quickly to get our employees safely out of the office and working from home. It was no small undertaking. It was very challenging. There was a number of challenges. There was technology. Every single company had a unique technology challenge to figure out how to get their employees working from home, not to mention the incredible financial investment to do so and to do that at speed. There was the just sheer logistics of getting hundreds of workers out the door safely with equipment, again, in an expedited fashion. And I just have to say that I'm just so incredibly proud of this industry and for the animation and visual effects companies' response to the crisis and how well they responded. At this point, due to their quick efforts, we have thousands of artists and production personnel working from home. We got working from home, and the goal is by doing that, we were able to deliver on the commitments that we had, the projects that we had in-house. So while we look a little bit ahead, we are now going to start to see the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis. There are some differences within visual effects and animation in terms of the scale of that impact. A lot of the animation companies are actually going to be able to continue at full speed, which is, again, a good news story. That's a lot of jobs, and that's a lot of engine continuing to run. So we're very thankful for that. But in other areas of it, we are seeing a delayed impact. Some animation companies are starting to see a reduction in funding for future projects. And very specifically, visual effects, as you can imagine, being so heavily reliant on physical production, is seeing a delayed impact. Not only will they see a delayed impact in the reduction of work, which is coming once they deliver their projects, they'll also see a delayed impact in starting up again, because physical production needs to get prepped, planned, shot, and going. So that is what we're looking at right now. We're actively engaged with MPPIA and Creative BC in communicating these variable impacts to government and collaborating on what type of specific recovery efforts might be right for our sector. So those communications are ongoing, and I thank those organizations for their support and their leadership. But really the subject of today's conversation largely is how we get back to work. And given the context I've just described in our sector, in our subsector, we're not calling it get back to work. We're calling it get back to facility, because we have fortunately been able to continue to work. So we're calling it to getting back to the studio. There are just tons of subjects in here for us, just like there are for physical production, but slightly different. The biggest one is an interesting one, is how many of our people will go back to the office. We have shifted to this remote work world. We've been allowed to do that through, as I mentioned earlier, some really fast action on behalf of the companies, but also the incredible partnership of our clients who have allowed us to do so. So what we're looking at is, what is the future? How much of this will need to continue in a remote type situation? And what's largely going to drive that is how many people can we actually get back into our physical offices? And that's what we're working on. So the Animation and Visual Effects Alliance has formed a back to facility, back to studio task force, mini task force. As you can tell, the entire industry is focusing on this subject. We have a unique environment. We have open plan workspaces. We have theaters that in some jargon are called sweat boxes, which is not great anytime, but can you imagine in a pandemic, that's a little bit worrisome. There's desk reviews, people work really closely together. So those are all the things we're thinking about. Obviously, we will follow the federal and provincial health guidelines. but we're going to come up, basically the group is formed to come up with best practices. We could have approached this as individual companies, but what we're trying to do is make sure that there's consistency across companies so that our employees who are going from facility to facility are treated safely and consistently from place to place. So we're looking at seating, cleaning, hallways, elevators, kitchens, all those kinds of things, how we can get back into our facilities doing that sort of thing safely. Again, the motivation of the Animation Visual Effects Alliance is to understand what the future of our industry looks like. The part that is going to head back into a physical work environment, how to do so in a way that is safe for our employees. So lots more to come there. That's it for me for now. I thank everyone again for participating and joining this webinar. It's really important to be able to share with each other what we're working on. I'm now going to pass off to Kendrie Upton, who's the Executive Director of the Directors Guild of Canada, BC.
Okay. Hi. Thank you so much, Michelle. I wish I had thought to wear like big pink bunny slippers that I could now reveal. That would be fun, but unfortunately I forgot. Like Prem, I'd like to begin by taking a moment to acknowledge the nations whose lands we are now individually living and working on. And given the incredible level of interest in this gathering today, that covers an enormous amount of territory. So given that land acknowledgements are actually specific to each region, I'd like to urge each of the participants on this call today to visit the Native Land Digital website following today's event and identify which First Nations territories you're personally located on. And in this way, each of us can reflect on our specific region and the particular nation on whose land we live and work. So we can send that link out as well. So on the labor front, key first and foremost for ourselves at the DGC, as well as for all of the labor organizations, has been the task of assisting members in getting access to all of the various programs that have been created to provide financial support and relief to BC workers. At the DGC, we've mounted a call out program to our full members of 1,400, our full membership is 1,400 people. So I don't think we've ever done that before. I think that's a first. And we're reaching out to ensure a number of things. First of all, that people are able to access the support that's out there, to connect with each of them, many of whom are in fact isolated, and to really just assess their general situation. In some cases, we may be offering them financial resources or access to the programs that are out there. In other circumstances, we may refer them to mental health offerings, such as Call Time Mental Health or our member assistance program that's available through Chappelle. Another major focus of the labor organizations has been to lobby CRA for consideration to create a program similar to the lifelong learning program or home buyers program that would allow people to borrow against their RSPs to help support themselves through this time. And as many of the other organizations have mentioned, the DGC BC has also created a local task force that's been formed and is curating issues basically by department. And we're also participating, as Tracy Friesen mentioned, in the CMPA National Task Force and the many other return to work efforts that are underway. For the past several weeks, I wanted to mention also what the many unemployed BC film workers have been engaged in various ways across the province in helping out their local communities. So you might have read about donation drives to get PPE to frontline healthcare workers. Some people are delivering meals to people on the downtown east side. And there are also various networks that have been set up to pair people with those who need assistance to access the various just daily necessities that they may need. At the DGC, we've continued with the promotion of our members. As at the same time as we know we're dealing with COVID, we're mindful that many people are at home with time on their hands. And also, frankly, that consumption of film and television is going to be at an all-time high. So we're hoping to sort of tap into this silver lining for those of our members who've worked many months of their lives over the last year or so to create programs that are now being aired during the COVID crisis. And we don't want them to miss out on those opportunities. I wanted to address one of the questions that was sent in. It was about gender parity and inclusion, and if those are being factored into the return to work planning that's being done. And that's a great question. And I wanted to answer that as the co-chair of the MPPIA Equity and Inclusion Committee. So I want to reassure everyone that we are continuing to meet and to look at how best to move the issues around E&I, equity and inclusion forward, given the situation that we now find ourselves in. One of the earliest discussions that we had at that committee was about not wanting to just create a guideline or a policy around equity and inclusion that then ends up sitting on a shelf gathering dust somewhere. So right away, we really realized that the most important, impactful approach to equity and inclusion is to ensure that that EI lens is baked into absolutely everything that you do, that it becomes a natural and consistent part of your organization's worldview, so that it's always considered in front and center way. So I'll give you the example from our organization, the DGC BC, of the Just Watch Us campaign that we launched at the DGC last September. So this program is aimed at, first, best equipping our BC director members to be able to sell themselves to our US studio clients. And then second, we aim to actually get them into those rooms with the right people so that they can do just that. And in our development of this program and the directors.ca website, we were consistently considering the diversity aspect of all that we were developing as we were going along. And we know that our US-based clients are always asking us, and have been since I started this job, to provide lists of diverse directors. And for years, we've run up against Canadian laws that, for all the right reasons, have prevented us from gathering and sharing that information. But you know, as I always say, as an ex-location manager, it's really fun to work on a show that has 5 directors. But we ended up in true directorial fashion, just not taking no for an answer. And while we were designing that program, we ended up going to the BC Human Rights Tribunal to plead our case and ask them how we could solve this problem. And we ended up creating what's called a special program that allows us to now gather that diversity information from our members and share it with producers who either have an equity program in place or who have need for a director with a specific voice and vision. So this work is groundbreaking, and it's also, I think, setting precedent. But most importantly, it could never have happened if we hadn't held equity and inclusion as a clear and unwavering focus of the program as it was being built. So I think that's really the key takeaway there, is that that's really the approach that we're trying to advocate. And we're in the process of looking how we can now move that forward in the place that we find ourselves. And so now we're advancing the Just Watch Us campaign to move into the areas of observer programs and other types of professional development, and still always through that lens being in the forefront. I also wanted to touch on the evolution of gender stats within the DGC BC membership and our permittee program. In 2016, within the DGC BC, our membership was just over 30% female, so not even a third. Today, 4 years later, our total membership is sitting at 38% female, still not enough, but at least it is moving in the right direction. However, the even more interesting stat that I wanted to share with you today is within the ranks of our permittees, who are currently made up of 49% women. So that's encouraging, and it's incumbent upon us as an organization to nurture that 49% and try to ensure that as many as possible follow through and actually join and take a place in the industry. And there's a second part to that discussion, because the path to increasing diversity within our memberships, while certainly they lay within a commitment to recruit and train, no question, but also crucially, we have to consider the creation of safer, more respectful workplaces, so that we offer these underrepresented groups a welcoming place to actually want to build their careers. The ActSafe coalition that was just formed, that Tracy and others have spoken about, includes representation from labor, employers, MPPIA, so all of the stakeholders, Creative BC for a government aspect, ActSafe and WorkSafe, and there are co-chairs from Creative BC, the employers, and labor. So it's a really, I think, well-rounded group. And the goal of that coalition is to create a document that will provide as much detailed guidance as possible. But I want to add that in addition to that coalition, the many BC film stakeholders at MPPIA, along with Creative BC, continue to maintain other crucial relationships like ours with the municipal film offices, and I'm guessing some of them are on the call today. And there's continued collaboration going on there as well, which I think is really important. The most recent community affairs meeting was a couple weeks ago on April 17th, feels like 2 years. And there were 70 participants, over 70 participants via Zoom on that call. So very encouraging to see that many people participating. There are conversations being taken place about how to get back into homes and businesses in ways that can reassure location owners, who we know are our key partners in this industry and who are also concerned about the idea of taking part. And many film offices have remained open and ready to issue permits throughout this COVID crisis, because as was mentioned earlier, there is no shelter in place order. And so they are able to say, great, we'll issue a permit as soon as we're able to go back to work. Creative BC is engaging with these offices regularly, and through Marnie Orr and her team, the film commissioner, and they're looking at the provincial health authorities, obviously, as a directive and guidance of how to decide when we're going to be able to go back. And also, I want to mention the Motion Picture Community Initiative, which is poised and ready to assist in community engagement when there is clarity around what message needs to be sent out. Last year, the City of Vancouver also formed an alliance with our industry through a group called the Motion Picture Leadership Group. And that group are being called upon in the coming days to participate in a roundtable with Mayor Stewart. And that discussion will focus on how the city can support the return to work in our industry. So a crazy amount of work is being done in the background and some of it in the forefront. And I'll just finish by saying how crucial the efficient sharing of all of this information that's being generated and the breaking down of silos is to this whole process. And we always like to say at MPPIA that in BC, it's truly our brand is collaboration. And in the coming weeks, I think that we'll be capitalizing on that in every possible way. So I thank you for joining us today. So many people, it's amazing to see so many people come out and take part in this event. And now I'd like to pass the discussion to Phil Klapwyk, who's the business representative for IATSE 891.
There we go. Thanks, Kendrie. First off, I'd like to acknowledge that I am on the traditional territorial land of the ActSafe peoples, and I have been here for 6 weeks. I come to you wearing 2 hats today. I am a representative of the single largest group of professional motion picture artists and technicians in British Columbia, representing 9,000 members, full members, and 5,500 permittees, or as we like to call them, future members. They represent 19 distinct crafts with over 140 separate occupations. So it's a wide swath of the workers in British Columbia that undertake the motion picture industry. We at 891 work closely with the rest of the unions in the British Columbia Council of Film Unions. That is the International Cinematographers Guild 669 and the Teamsters 155. And we also coordinate our activities with the Association of Film Unions, including the DGC BC and UBCP ACTRA. I don't speak for those people, but I do consider everything they say, and we work collaboratively together all the time. I sit here as well as the vice chair of the Motion Picture Production Industry Association, and I'm proud to participate in that group where we form a single vision and a single voice for the industry in everything that we do. And that collaboration is an incredible spirit that resonates really well with our clients and with our government and with everybody that we intersect with. But today I want to talk about the perspective of the 9,000 members and 5,500 permittees of 891. Since 2016, 891 and the rest of the unions and guilds have experienced incredible growth in the industry. 891 alone has grown by 4,000 members, which means that over almost half of our workforce has never experienced a real downturn in the industry or even maybe a job interruption. All the senior members, I'm sure, can remember when we had film and television that was seasonal, maybe even a part-time job, and you'd go skiing in the winter and pick it up in the spring again. But overnight, what we've experienced is about 95% unemployment. And that has a chilling effect on the workers in British Columbia. So at the unions and guilds, we focused initially on education and advocacy. Education, trying to research all of the benefits that would be available to help all of our members access funds while their jobs were put on hold. And then legal advice to actually, find our way through all of the jargon and make sure that we were giving the proper advice as to how to access those benefits. After that, we turned to advocacy, making sure that we represented all of our workers at all levels of government to ensure that none of our members would fall through the social safety net that was being created. We did that both through the MPPIA and our channels there, as well as at the BC Federation of Labor, where we pressed constantly to make sure that workers in the motion picture industry were considered alongside of all other sectors. But now that the initial shock to the system has subsided, we turn our thoughts to recovery. And as terrible as this production shutdown is, and believe me, I understand how hard it is on people when they're facing unemployment right now, it does present a unique opportunity. We have an experienced film crew who has never in their entire life probably felt the ability to spend the time on themselves. I can tell you right now that my wife thinks that COVID means yard work. And I'm really waiting for the entire thing to be over so I can get back to going back to my job. But they're all focusing on themselves. And as an indication of this, the international IATSE has an arrangement with LinkedIn Learning, where all of our members that work in the industry have access, free access to that system of education. We have had so many requests for access to online training. It's really encouraging to see our members diving in and during this downturn, using that time to upgrade their skills so that when we return, we will come back better than we were before. Secondly, and this is where I think we really have a great opportunity here. We currently have a motion picture industry in British Columbia that is viewed as one of the safest places to shoot film and television in the world. And with this downturn, we can take the time to make sure that when we come back, it is the safest place to work. And within our union, what we're doing is consulting. So we're making sure we're turning to the professionals who perform each of the 140 jobs within our local to tap their experience. And I'm sure that every single union is doing the same. Because every policy and procedure that forms the pathway to recovery in this industry needs to be viewed through a filter of those professionals that actually build the industry every single day. Now, I'm confident that an industry that can figure out the logistics of how to blow up a house, reset it, and blow it up again safely can definitely tackle the nightmare that social distancing, proper hygiene, and a viral pandemic pose. We are working on that together as a united front to make sure that we are all on the same page and moving forward to a safer and better film and television industry in British Columbia. And with that, I'm going to turn to the producer extraordinaire that we all know and love, Justis Greene.
Hello, everybody. Phil, I think it's so appropriate that I'm following you and also that I happen to be the end person on this group of speakers. I think my first day on set, anybody that spent 10 minutes with Justis Greene knows that you're 5 minutes into it before you get your set story. So here it goes. Was for 891. The local then, Phil, had 28 members. It was a spin-off of the stage local in Vancouver. There's still a couple of us kicking around, I guess. So as you know, I'm still an IATSE member after all these years. I think the reason it was important for me to be a part of this was that as much as all of these people that have spoken have done such an enormous amount to get us closer to getting back to work safely, I'm the one, I suppose, of all the speakers that's actually still on the ground. We're actively in pre-production. We were actively in production. We were on day 10 of a 70-day shoot. You know, I was thinking back when I was preparing to talk today, and a lot of things crossed my mind, but you know, and again, I'm thinking of Phil, your rank and file, and the DGC members and the Teamsters and all the folks on the ground that support everything else that we spoke about today, including the post-production side of our business and the facility side of our business and the equipment side of our business. And I've touched on all of those things over all these years. You know, we shot a film once at 11,000 feet with a really large cast and a crew who's going to get to work on the mountaintop glacier by heavy lift helicopter, weather permitting, every day, and it was a challenge. And we figured it out. And by we, I mean Phil, your members, and the Teamster members, and the Guild members, and the support, and the equipment companies, and the facility people, and all the group of people that are on this call today. So we will figure this out, and we will come back, and we will be stronger, and we'll be smarter, and we'll be more efficient, and we'll make even better product, you know. And I was walking today and I was thinking that, you know, if we were in Oakville and we were all talking about going back to work at Ford, you know, we'd be going to that factory and Phil, you'd be doing the rear bumper and I'd be doing the front bumper. But God, if that didn't work out for some reason, you were too close to me or whatever the heck, we'd be stuck. Well, the great part about us is my project and every one of these projects has a creative writer, has a creative director, has a creative team behind it. And if we decide that even though our Ford had 2 bumpers, maybe in this new environment, it's only going to have 1 bumper. And you know what? It's actually going to be on the side of the car. And instead of 30 people putting it on, it's going to be 15 people in 2 shifts. And those are the simple things that we're going to end up working out. And I guess when I came to this today, I wanted to emphasize, as I had in an earlier meeting, that we finished on a Friday, like everyone else, on day 11 of 70. I'm sorry, on day 10 of 70. On the Monday, when we were working out all the things every other company in town was working out, we actually were also working on what our day 11 was going to be when we came back. And we've continued to work on that every day to the point of right now I could distribute to you a call sheet for my day 11. I have a date when I'm coming back. And granted, it's not a date that I'm necessarily going to hit, but I spent my entire life making plans around dates that I had to move. I had to either bring them forward or I had to push them back. And every time I did that, it affected 150 or 200 or 300 people, and I justified it to the studio or to the network. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And that's exactly what all the other members of the Guild, the Directors Guild of America, the Directors Guild of Canada, whether it be directors, whether it be producers, whether it be production managers, whether it be, doesn't matter what it is, gaffers, grips. We're all going to roll with this. We're all going to come back. I can tell you literally what we're going to do on day 12, what we're going to do on day 13, and how we're going to do it. And it's safe based on exactly what I know today, what we know today, as far as what the rules are today, and they will change. I will bring the crew back safely, and I know all the other shows in town will as well. And we'll proceed ahead, and we'll make, as we always have, wonderful, progressive, and quite honestly, fun, because otherwise, what the heck are we here? Shows in Vancouver. I know that we have a list of questions from all of you, and some of them are specific and some of them I'll be involved in answering. But I guess what I mostly wanted to say was that the folks you've heard so far represent all the unions, guilds, and the associations to do with motion picture in British Columbia and the studios. And I suppose I represent the boots on the ground. And I just want to say, as I always have, is that we do have a plan. We will keep you safe and we will move ahead. And with that, I think I want to introduce, bring back Peter. And I think, Peter, we have a list of questions to answer.
Well, thanks so much, Justis. And, you know, we didn't just bring Justis and Phil on to gender balance this panel. You know, it was their leadership ability. So glad to have them on board. Firstly, I'd like to thank our panelists. We had Asha, Wendy, Prem, Tracy ×2, Michelle, Kendrie, Phil, and Justis, and all the other leadership in the industry that has helped you know, put this together and figure out, you know, the plan to get back to work safely. And I'd like to thank the audience for their engagement and listening. We received hundreds of questions from the audience, and we tried to collate them, but there's a number of questions that we're working on that we're, you know, not able to answer. There's certainly questions on liability and risk management and insurance and all those questions that are being worked on right now by a lot of people, and you know, if there's any update we can give you on that in the future, we certainly will. And then there's some questions on the tax credits, whether they're sustainable. And you know, all I can say is we've had a fantastic relationship and engagement with the government in British Columbia for the last 30 years, and we're continuing to do so. We've probably never had as good of engagement as we've had in the last 5 to 10 years. So I'm confident that our interests are aligned, that we want competitive tax credits going forward, and we want this industry is a key economic force in British Columbia now. So I think we're in good hands that way. So let's get to some of our questions here. Okay, the first question is this is a good one. Is there a projection or timeline for production starting up? And maybe Prem, you could take a shot at that. And then I know there's Tracy and Kendra might want to follow up.
Sure. And I think I'm off mute. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Of course, just as I'm off mute, you can probably hear a lawnmower or something. So apologies. Windows are closed, but hey, this is the part of the magic of working at home. Yeah, in terms of startup dates. So yes, I think others will have something to contribute to this for sure. As I noted earlier, next week, the province will be unveiling some guidelines and checklists to help us in various industries to look at what reopening looks like, from offices to some of the things that Michelle talked about. How do you function in an office in this period before there's a vaccine and still the virus is still in existence, to how we operate on productions themselves. So hopefully that will, once that is released next week, and the coalition will be actively working in the coming days, and I'm certain over the weekend, in starting to develop production specific guidelines. I think it could be possible that if people are ready and health and safety protocols are in place, that it could be before the end of May. Now that's just me saying that right now based on what we might learn next week. And as Justis noted, like, he's got his day 11 plan. So I think there'll be a few people like that, and certainly going into pre-production or commercial production, there may be that some of that stuff will start out before the end of May. But again, we'll have to see what some of these guidelines look like next week and how quickly we would be able to adapt to some of them. Hopefully that's helpful to you.
Great, thanks, thanks Prem for that. Anybody else want to tackle that question? Timelines, Phil?
Yeah, I am yeah. I just wanted to just say that I think the key thing is that we will go back to work when we're confident that everyone can do it safely. And that confidence part really means a lot. And it's confidence of the workers, it's confidence of the government, it's the confidence of our clients. Everybody needs to be confident in the ability to do it safely.
I think the other thing, Phil, to add to that is, all the stakeholders want to get us back to work. Certainly the studios want to get back to work, and all our members want to get back to work. And every other jurisdiction is going to have the same issues as we have. I think we're just a bit ahead of the curve on that. So I think in terms of any jurisdiction, we're in pretty good shape. Okay, question number 2. What is the process for our unions and studios producers deciding on back to work protocol? Kendrie, why don't we start with you on that?
Sure, I'll take that one. So as mentioned in our initial presentation, there are task forces at various levels, both locally and nationally, that have been working on this for many, many weeks now. As I mentioned earlier at the DGC, we have a group that are looking at the various issues and processes from their specific perspective. 891 and the other unions all have similar groups, as you've heard here, working on their specific concerns. And there's also the coalition that's been discussed here. And that group is really intended to provide a pulling together of the massive amount of information that's being both generated and gathered and collated. And to the point that Tracy Wood made earlier, we're also looking at all of the various organizations that have also put out information for other jurisdictions and kind of cribbing from those as well. So, ultimately, we're trying to organize this. This coalition will be looking to organize this into a complete and cohesive document that can be used to relaunch the industry, both from an overarching level and also in a more specific way. So I think it's really important that all levels of our industry be heard from. It's important to hear from the entry-level employees who, as we know from just history, are always at potential risk when any new task is brought onto a production. And certainly we at the unions are very mindful mindful in not letting that happen in this circumstance. It's equally crucial that our crew with mid and high level experience have the opportunity to share their perspectives of their particular departments. And of course, no plan is ever going to be effective without the buy-in of our producers, who I would remind everybody are ultimately legally responsible for maintaining safe workspaces. So the answer to the question, as I see it, is that the process is being approached both granularly by many, many crew members from the perspective of their specific departmental needs and concerns. And it's also being approached from a bigger picture perspective using a sort of a meta view that ultimately pulls all of those details into what we hope will be one comprehensive plan for a relaunch that will both, as everybody keeps stressing, be safe for those people who are going to work, but will also be supported by our employers so that that can work together. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kendrie. Let's see. What levels of support will the industry need from municipalities? That was addressed a little bit, but Prem, why don't you take that one?
Sure, Peter, and I'm gonna also defer to Kendrie a little bit on this one as well. The municipalities and municipal film offices are a critical part of our ecosystem, and ensuring that they are ready and able to permit, and that we're working with the city of Vancouver and the municipalities, but then also the regions across the province, that they are ready and equipped. And again, those same protocols will apply when you're going on locations, when you are understanding what those look like. How can we have the public confidence as well, that when we're entering neighborhoods or facilities and homes, that we as individuals, as employees, feel safe, but also as citizens who are encountering these productions. Again, our film commission team, Marnie Orr, everybody has been in regular contact and weekly conversations as we start to look at what a gear up might look like. And I do want to stress again that it will be a dial up, and that's how we really need to approach it. It's not going to be a switch that suddenly goes on and everything is back to March 10th activities. And it will look different, and it will look different in the municipalities as well. But we know that, again, the municipalities and the regions across the province have been extremely supportive in trying to understand, again, what are those protocols and what will they look like and what kind of guidelines do we need to meet.
Thanks for that, Prem. Here's a question that I think we in some ways answered, but it was asked quite a bit. How are we collaborating with other jurisdictions across the country to restart the industry? Tracy Friesen, why don't you take that one?
Sure. As mentioned, the production industry task force has been a real space for those kinds of considerations. But it's I just want to call out a couple of things that I acknowledge are tricky, right? There are different jurisdictions. A lot of going back to work is dependent on the provinces, and a lot of the aspects are provincially specific. There are factors that are federally driven that have to do with immigration and the border. And one of the topics I think that we still will have work to do collectively within British Columbia and across the country is to think and be really open about questions around sequencing, around being coordinated, around a possible race for space. A lot of production stopped at the same time, and there's going to be a pent-up demand because a lot of people are in development. We know provincially different provinces may be ready at different times. And it's possible that domestic production, for instance, might be able to get started before borders are completely open, but then there's funding consideration that Canadian independent producers have in mind around things that might slow up that potential. So there are the bi-weekly Provincial Industry Association meetings that were mentioned before are a place for airing some of that. And I know the CMPA is working carefully also with Section 21, which is the Ontario version of ActSafe, the APQM, of course. And these conversations are alive, as are the conversations around insurance and how some of these bigger issues will be solved, not just within the province and nationally, but between provinces. So that's more surfacing challenges and issues, but the conversations are underway, and I think there's a lot of really wise and collaborative connections that are happening on that front.
Anyone else like to comment on that question, Phil?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, and I'm sure it's the same for Kendrie as well. The IA has been in contact with. We have a weekly film call for all of the film locals across Canada, where we talk about things that are happening with the COVID crisis and how we're responding to it. Also internationally, we were talking with our colleagues in all of the other film jurisdictions, Hollywood as well as Atlanta and New York. So we're all in constant contact and dialogue about best practices and what's being developed and brought about. I believe the Teamsters are in the same picture. I know Lori Ward is in contact with Local 399 in Hollywood all the time. So we're all coordinating the efforts nationally and internationally.
Great, thanks for that. Kendrie.
Yeah, I definitely completely concur with Phil. I've told the story a couple of times to people about the fact that about a week ago, at one point, there were three things on my calendar. Every one of them was called task force. I had no idea which one I should be at, which one was most important. People were texting me from all three going, are you coming onto this? It's the amount of work and the sheer amount of, honestly, experience from all the different levels of the industry that are in these rooms is quite astonishing and really quite amazing to have the opportunity, to Phil's point, to work on making an industry that's already so fantastic better again. And and be able to return to work in a way that's just that bit more functional than it was before, maybe that little bit better. It's very exciting. I did want to go back for 2 seconds just to the comment that the comments that Prem was making about our connections with municipalities, and just say, my perspective, just speaking personally, as a person who was a location manager for 30 years before I came into this role, that we have, in my opinion, and I don't think I'm wrong about this, stronger relationships with our municipal partners and our regions than we have ever had in the history of our industry, to my mind. They're more engaged, more connected. They know each other and they know us. I mean, I just think that there's been so much work that's been done in the 4 years sort of since things went crazy in the industry in 2015, 2016, 4 or 5 years, that has just, really, if this was going to happen, and it's very sad that it has happened, but if it was going to happen, it's the best possible time for us, I think, to deal with it, because we do have relationships like we have never had before. The fact that there is a motion picture leadership group at the City of Vancouver is so amazing, because you can just draw on that group as opposed to let's start from scratch. And that's true in so many of the different venues. So I'm really encouraged by that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Our last question, I mean, we've got a lot of questions. We're going to, be continuing to answer questions on our website, and we'll advise you on that. But this one goes to Justis, I think. Justis, how are the economics going to work with all this health and safety protocol now, and social distancing and everything else? How is that going to work?
I think they're just going to fall apart, Peter. I think. You know what? I think that there's no question there's a cost to it. And I know that we had several questions that were related, some that perhaps we weren't able to get to, that were related to who's picking up the cost and et cetera, et cetera. But it's like anything else it has, as I believe Kendrie pointed out, the employer is responsible for all aspects of health and safety. And so every studio and network, certainly my own, and is moving ahead, already moving ahead. With the help of a close friend who's on this call, I think I purchased 10,000 masks this week. But moving ahead to make the entire workplace safer. And what we will be doing shortly, I'm speaking for myself, but I know that all the other producers and production managers have a version of this, is we will be sitting down with the keys in all our areas and working out what our plan is. Basically, Phil, I think presenting our plan, and again, I'm presenting a plan for a specific show, but all the shows will do a similar thing, and working with our key players to make sure that I haven't missed something. I'm sure I will, and then we'll adjust it. There will be a cost. There's absolutely a cost to do it. Might we be shooting shorter days? Might we be doing what our friend Grace Gilroy has already shown to us can be done for episodic television and going to French hours? Might we be adding an hour a day on to just basically making sure people are healthy, testing them when they come in, and providing them with the right equipment, et cetera, et cetera. absolutely doing all those things, and all those costs will obviously be borne by us and by the production. And the thing about British Columbia and in Canada, but the thing about British Columbia is we will remain competitive, because those same costs in Atlanta, Georgia will have to be done. The same costs in New York City will have to be done. The same costs will have to be borne in Los Angeles. So we're going to bear the brunt of it, and we'll do it with a smile on our face, and we'll make it work, and we'll just move ahead.
Well, on that note, thanks very much to the panel. Many thanks to everyone who's taken the time to join us for this session today. Special thanks, of course, to our panelists, all of whom invest a lot of time, as well as others in the industry. And we know that there are a lot of questions that are unanswered. And one of our main goals here today is really to hear those questions. We got a lot of input from our emails and from people joining this call that we're going to be working on, and that we have been working on. With this in mind, we will be hosting another info session next Friday at 2 p.m. on Zoom live stream and on Facebook at MPPIA BC. And we've got a slightly different panel for that, but we just want to keep everyone informed. We expect to bring you updates and additional personal perspectives from those helping to develop the recovery plan. An invitation will circulate early next week, so please look out for it. We want to answer questions at these sessions, and our best way to manage with such a large group is advanced submissions. You can submit questions either as you register for the Zoom or by submitting to info@mpia.com. That's info@mpia.com. In BC, we talked about this, that we are a collaborative production community, unlike any other production community. And, you know, it gives me a lot of confidence that, you know, we're going to come out on top of this. So just be patient and have a nice, safe weekend. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Well.
Be safe, be well.